My name is Aaliyah Carter and I'm 22 years old. On the prestigious graduation day at Stanford University, my name was called as valedictorian of the finance program. Thunderous applause filled the hall, crimson flags waved under the May sunshine, and I walked across the stage with my diploma in hand. But just a few hours earlier I had heard my parents' voices over the phone, cold in a way I never thought I could forget. "Take the bus yourself. We're busy driving your sister Madison's brand new Tesla to her high school graduation party." That moment it felt like my whole world collapsed. I had spent 4 years working myself to the bone, studying while secretly building a dream they knew nothing about. Meanwhile, all the affection and celebration was reserved for Madison, the cherished younger daughter who had always been the family's only pride. Have you ever been pushed aside by your own blood, even on the most important day of your life? If you've ever felt that sting, leave a comment so I know I'm not alone. Hit like and subscribe to this channel to follow me on this journey, where you'll see a truth I had to learn the hard way. Sometimes family wounds don't break you, they turn into the strength that lifts you higher. I was born into a family outsiders thought was perfect. My father, Richard Carter, was a well-known attorney in Dallas, Texas. He walked into courtrooms like a general, his commanding voice silencing both opponents and juries. My mother, Elaine, was a respected psychology professor at a major university. To the community, they were the model couple: powerful, intellectual, and wealthy. The mansion with a pool out back, the cocktail parties lighting up the neighborhood every weekend. Everything pointed to a family that wanted for nothing. But behind those polished stone walls, there was another truth. My place in the family began to fade the day Madison, my little sister, was born. I still remember that morning they brought her home from the hospital. She had sparkling blue eyes and golden hair that shimmered in the sunlight. Guests poured in, calling her a little angel. I was just 4, nudged to the corner and reminded to be a good big sister. From that day on, I knew the light in my family no longer shone on me. On my 8th birthday, my parents gave me a box of math and science books with the reminder: "You need to prepare for the kind of career your parents expect." I forced a smile and carefully stacked the books on my shelf. 2 months later, when Madison turned 4, the backyard transformed into a glittering pink castle. White ponies for the kids to ride, a live band playing all afternoon, and a 3-tier cake covered in sparkling decorations. As I snapped photos with my old phone, my heart sank. Even then, I understood. In this house, luxury and joy belonged to Madison. Family vacations revolved around her too. When I was 12, I begged to go to a summer science camp, an opportunity that could have changed my childhood. But when I asked, my mother just patted my shoulder. "Next year, Aaliyah. This summer, Madison wants Disney World. We'll all go." I nodded, holding back tears, and tucked the brochure into my desk drawer. The promise of next year never came. The contrast showed most in school. I worked tirelessly to keep a perfect GPA, joined debate team, wrote for the school paper, pouring every ounce of effort into something that might make my parents proud. But when I brought home a report card full of A's, my father only muttered, "That's what we expect of you." No praise, no hug. Meanwhile, Madison came home with B's and C's, and my parents beamed. "You tried so hard, honey. We're so proud." That gap wedged itself between us. I never blamed Madison, she was just a child raised in indulgence. But the distance grew. He got a brand new car at 16. She was used to designer clothes, to being the star of every dinner conversation. I was used to picking up extra jobs for pocket money, folding worn clothes to stretch another year, sitting in silence waiting for recognition that never came. The most painful memory came when I was 17. I had won first place in the state science fair, a title earned after months of sleepless nights, failed experiments, and meticulous notes. I was ecstatic, ready for my parents to watch me accept the award. But when I called to remind them, my mother's voice was light, almost apologetic. "Oh, Aaliyah, today overlaps with Madison's piano recital. She's practiced for months. You understand." I forced a laugh. Yes, I understand. That night, I stood alone on the big stage under blinding lights, hearing the announcer call my name as champion. Rows of parents cheered, waving proudly at their children. My eyes searched the audience for familiar faces that weren't there. My victory speech was swallowed by loneliness. When the medal was placed in my hands, it felt more like a cold emptiness than triumph. When I got home, my parents were laughing by the piano, praising Madison for her best performance yet. I set my medal on the table. No one looked up. Madison grinned sweetly. "Aren't you happy, Aaliyah? Today was perfect." I swallowed hard. Yes. Perfect. That night, I sat by the window, city lights of Texas glowing outside. The sharp ache in my chest hardened into resolve. I realized if I wanted recognition, it would never come from them. I would have to write my own story with my own hands. And deep down, I swore one day they would have no choice but to look at me. After the science fair, I stayed awake nearly all night. The medal gleamed on my desk, but it only reminded me my efforts would never be enough. I started seeing clearly. Nothing would change in that house. Madison would always be the favored one. I would always be the shadow expected to set an example. When I scored a perfect E, my father glanced up from his newspaper and muttered, "Good as expected." Yet when Madison joined the cheer squad, the house erupted in celebration. Neighbors invited for a party. I sat in my room listening to laughter outside my door, telling myself I'd have to find joy somewhere else. By senior year, I was accepted into Stanford with a partial scholarship. It should have been a moment of pride. Instead, over dinner, my mother smiled faintly. "Stanford is expensive. You'll have to plan carefully. But you're strong, you can handle it. We need to focus our finances on Madison now." That sentence etched itself in my mind. You're strong enough to manage on your own. We have to take care of Madison more. It rang like a verdict sealing my fate in that family. So I made my own plan. If no one would back me, I'd back myself. The summer before college, I worked 3 jobs. Mornings at a cafe, the smell of roasted beans clinging to my shirt. Afternoons, typing until my fingers ached as a legal assistant. Evenings, tutoring math for neighborhood kids. I came home near midnight, eyes burning but my spirit steeled. Some mornings, after only a few hours of sleep, I woke to Madison's laughter by the pool, showing off plans for her new car. I wiped sweat from my brow after a long shift and whispered to myself, I need to leave this place as soon as possible. The day I left for Stanford, there was no party, no cheerful send-off. My father folded his newspaper and said, "Remember to save money. College is for studying, not fun." My mother added casually, "Pack enough clothes. Don't get sick." Then they turned back to planning Madison's vacation. I quietly pulled my suitcase to the door. For a fleeting moment, I wished for a hug, just one word of encouragement. But when I stepped out, all I heard was the TV news. I took a cab to the airport alone, clutching my ticket to California, feeling both heavy and strangely free. My first days at Stanford were brutal. The partial scholarship covered basic tuition, but dorm, books, food, I had to handle everything else. I found work in the campus library, a 7 a.m. shift. Between classes, I delivered food for a local restaurant. On weekends, I worked retail in Palo Alto. What little money I made paid rent, the rest went to the cheapest instant noodles I could find. Many nights, I sat alone in my dorm room, the dim yellow light falling across my desk as my hand kept scribbling notes after a long, exhausting work shift. There were times I wanted to give up, to pick up the phone and beg my parents for help. But then that sentence echoed again, "You're strong enough to handle it on your own." It was like a blade, cutting deep and leaving pain, yet at the same time forcing me forward, never allowing me to retreat. One winter evening, I called home just hoping to hear a warm voice. My mother answered, but after a few casual questions, she quickly ended the call. "I have to get ready for Madison's party. Call me back later." I sat in silence, listening to the cold click of the line disconnecting. At that moment, I understood clearly. To them, I was nothing more than a shadow lingering at the edges. Instead of drowning in self-pity, I began to turn that pain into fuel. I learned how to hunt for used clothes, attended free campus events that served food just to save money. A few friends and I pooled our cash to buy textbooks, then took turns reading them. Every paycheck from my 3 different jobs, no matter how small, I carefully divided into envelopes. One for rent, one for books, one for emergencies. Sometimes I wondered if I was being too hard on myself. But then I'd remember Madison's brand new car from Dad, the lavish parties from Mom, and I'd clench my fists, whispering to myself, I don't need them. I'll prove it on my own. One rainy afternoon, as I left the library with aching legs, a classmate asked, Why don't you just ask your family for help? They're wealthy, aren't they? I only smiled and replied, Not every family is what you think. A short answer, but inside me was a mountain of buried memories. Those years were lonely but full of determination. I taught myself not to wait for recognition, not to beg for affection. I hardened, each dollar earned proof that I could survive without anyone's backing. The harder I pushed, the clearer it became. The path I chose, independence, was the only way out of the Carter family's shadow. That journey began with my parents' coldness, but I slowly realized it was also the grindstone shaping me into someone no one could ever dismiss again. The first days at Stanford were truly a trial. I walked onto that prestigious campus with equal parts pride and fear. While many freshmen arrived chauffeured by their parents in luxury cars, I hauled my old suitcase from the bus stop to the dorm. My dorm was in the oldest part of campus, walls stained with age, hallways so narrow 2 people passing had to press against the side. My little room barely fit 2 bunk beds, a wooden desk with peeling paint, and a wobbly wardrobe. My roommate was Chloe Martinez, a girl with long black hair and bright brown eyes, from a hardworking immigrant family in Arizona. On the very first night as I was unpacking, Chloe dropped her backpack and sighed, I hope this place doesn't have mice. I burst out laughing and suddenly the room felt less heavy. We quickly found common ground. Chloe worked in the cafeteria to cover tuition, while I juggled the library and food delivery. Many nights we sat under that weak yellow lamp, our hands trembling with exhaustion, yet still pushing each other forward. Once, when I collapsed on the desk, Chloe set a steaming cup of tea in front of me and whispered, You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Aaliyah. But if you want to change your fate, I'm with you. Those nights, I cried silently more times than I could count. Chloe was the only one who saw the tears soaking my notebook when pressure from school and money became unbearable. But instead of pity, she chose to sit beside me in silence, studying as a quiet show of solidarity. From then on, a bond grew between us that I had never found in my own family. Life on the edge taught me to stretch every cent. Lunch was usually peanut butter sandwiches or instant noodles, and I became an expert at finding free campus events, usually stocked with pizza or cookies. Chloe and I called it treasure hunting. We roamed Stanford's campus laughing, bringing home leftover food that was just enough to fill us up for the day. Even in the exhaustion, I noticed something. Hardship sharpened my mind. One late night, as Chloe and I calculated rent, we realized we were tracking every single expense on scraps of paper, from spare coins for coffee to expensive textbooks. Chloe sighed, I wish there were an app that helped broke students manage money better. I always feel like my money disappears without a trace. Her words struck like lightning. I stared at our pile of expense notes, then thought of students across America struggling just like us. What if there was a tool to help them manage tuition, books, meals, rent, easily? Life could be a little less brutal. I began jotting down the first ideas for a financial app for students, something I would later call Edu Fund. At that time, it was only scribbles in a small notebook. I didn't dare share it with anyone but Chloe. One night, I handed her the notebook, nervously explaining, if we had this, we'd know exactly how much money we had left, whether to pay tuition or buy books, even get suggestions to save. Chloe stayed quiet for a long moment, then looked up, her eyes glowing. Aaliyah, this isn't just for us. It could help millions of students. You have to make it real. Her encouragement gave me strength. By day, I still hustled through my 3 jobs. By night, I sat with my old laptop, fumbling through basic coding tutorials. Chloe sometimes sat next to me, not understanding a word of code but still cheering. Go, Aaliyah. Someday people will know this idea. Of course, I wasn't always confident. After grueling shifts, I'd collapse on my bed whispering, "What am I doing? A girl with no backing, no money. How can I change anything?" Chloe often answered with a simple but powerful line, "You have me. And I believe in you." Chloe's presence was the anchor I never had. While my parents placed Madison on a pedestal, here in this cramped dorm room, I had someone who truly saw me. And from those nights of tears and study, my dream began to take shape. Not just to prove myself to my parents, but to give other students the chance I never had. I never imagined that from this tiny corner of the dorm, a new journey was being written. A journey that would take me places even my family couldn't imagine. One crisp fall morning in my sophomore year, I walked into an advanced finance class taught by Professor Daniel Hughes. A man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, a steady voice, and eyes that seemed to pierce right through to your thoughts. From the first lecture, I knew Hughes wasn't like other professors. He didn't just teach from textbooks, he forced us to connect theory to real life. When the class discussed America's student loan system, I couldn't hold back. I submitted a 10-page analysis I had written on my own, comparing student debt costs to interest rates imposed by financial institutions, exposing how low-income students bore unfair burdens. I thought it was just me venting. But a week later, Hughes asked me to stay after class. "Aaliyah, your paper truly surprised me," he said, slow but firm. "This analysis has more depth than studies I've read from seasoned scholars. Have you considered turning these ideas into a real project?" I froze. Never in my life had anyone in my family used words like wonderful or impressive for my work. Yet here was a respected professor looking at me with genuine expectation. I stammered, I just thought it was an injustice that needed fixing. But I don't know if I could actually do anything about it." Hughes smiled, pouring me a cup of coffee from the thermos he always carried. "Every big idea starts with anger at injustice. But the ones who can turn anger into action, they're rare. You have that quality." Those words felt like a light flickering inside me. That day he invited me to his office to talk more. The walls were lined with awards, certificates, and photos of Hughes with former students who had gone on to become successful entrepreneurs. I sat down on the wooden chair, clutching my notebook. He began, "Aaliyah, I want to introduce you to a group of startup mentors here on campus. They can help you turn these analyses into a real business model. Of course, the decision is yours." I was stunned. It felt as if a door that had always been locked was suddenly opening. I nodded, my heart racing. A week later, I was invited to meet with the mentors. They were entrepreneurs who had built their own companies, Stanford alumni who had returned to guide the next generation. In the small conference room, my hands trembled as I presented my idea. An online platform that would let students borrow and repay tuition with transparent, lower-than-market interest rates, combined with smart budgeting tools. I called it EduFund. At first, some looked at me with doubt. A sophomore paying tuition with 3 part-time jobs, talking about changing an entire financial system. But when I drew the cash flow model on the board and explained how small investors could connect with students through a transparent platform, their eyes began to change. One of them, Mr. Matthews, founder of an educational technology company, set his pen down and asked, "This idea has potential. But do you have the perseverance to see it through?" I met his eyes and replied firmly, "I've lived my whole life in unfairness. If I have the chance to change that, I won't give up." From that day, my life took on a new rhythm. By day, I still went to class and worked my jobs. But every evening, I poured myself into drafting a detailed plan for EduFund. Chloe often sat beside me, helping with documents or simply bringing me a cup of coffee. She would joke, "When EDU Fund succeeds one day, don't forget to list me in the history books as the spiritual co-founder." I laughed, but deep down I knew without Chloe I might not last. Professor Hughes followed every step of my progress. He pointed out weaknesses in the plan, recommended books on capital markets, and sometimes simply reminded me, "Don't forget you're not just doing this for yourself. You're paving the way for other students." Each word felt like fuel for my spirit. I felt someone truly believed in my ability, not because I was this strong older sister, not because someone expected me to be an example for Madison, but because I was valuable in my own right. EDU Fund began to take shape not just on paper but as a mission in my mind. I imagined students opening the app, seeing their loan details, their repayment plan, and finally escaping that fog of constant worry. I remembered myself on that dorm bed, trembling hands counting every dollar for textbooks. If this tool had existed then, how much suffering I could have avoided. One night, as I typed furiously, Chloe suddenly asked, "Aaliyah, have you thought about the day your parents find out about this? What will they say?" I froze, staring at the glowing screen. After a long pause, I whispered, "Maybe they won't care. Or worse, they'll see it as nothing more than my duty. But it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I know where my real worth lies." Chloe smiled, tapping my shoulder. "That's the Aaliyah I admire." From that moment, I knew this project wasn't just an idea. It was the path I had to walk. It was the only answer I could give to the years of being abandoned in my own home. And with Hughes guiding me, I believed this time I wouldn't be alone. Ethan Miller entered my life like a strange wind, glamorous and dangerous in ways I didn't yet recognize. He was a final-year MBA student from a wealthy family in New York. The first time I saw him at a startup seminar, I was drawn to his confidence, the way he spoke effortlessly to everyone around him. Ethan knew how to impress. When he approached me asking about EDU Fund with eyes full of interest, my heart stirred. We began dating. Ethan took me to restaurants I had only ever walked past. He placed his hand on my back at lavish parties, introducing me to friends as the smartest girl I've ever met. Late at night, while I worked on business plans, Ethan poured me wine and said, "You're different, Aaliyah. You have grit most people, even me, don't have." At the time, I believed I had found the anchor I'd been longing for. After years of coldness from my parents, having someone sit beside me, listening and praising, made me soften. I started showing him my notes, the numbers I was calculating for EDU Fund. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, asking questions like an investor. I thought he truly cared about my dream. But cracks soon appeared. Once, while we argued over the financial model, Ethan scoffed, "You think you can change this whole system? Without family backing, you won't go far. Projects like this need major capital. Where will you get it?" His words pierced my deepest wound. I forced a smile. "I have Professor Hughes, the mentors, and myself. I don't need to rely on my parents." Ethan shrugged dismissively. "I'm just telling the truth. Big ambition without strong roots doesn't last." I let it go, thinking it was just a difference of opinion. But slowly, I noticed his interest in me shifting more toward the project than me as a person. He constantly asked about the mentors, the meetings, the numbers in my spreadsheets. One night, when I mentioned the mentors suggested I prepare for a small funding round, Ethan paused, then said, "If you want, I can connect you with some of my family's friends. They invest heavily in edtech." I was grateful, thinking he truly wanted to help. I sent him the pitch deck I had worked so hard to prepare. He studied it carefully, nodded, and said he'd show it to friends in the industry. I trusted him, even felt proud to have a partner willing to stand by me. Until one day at a cafe near campus, I overheard two MBA students whispering. One said, "Did you hear? Ethan's working on a student finance platform. Apparently he's got a detailed plan, pitching to investors next week." I froze. My heart pounded. I sat still, my coffee going cold. "Ethan, a student finance platform. Wasn't that EDU Fund?" That evening, I confronted him in the luxury apartment his family rented for him near campus. I laid my printed plan on the table and asked, "Ethan, what are you planning to do with these documents?" He looked startled, then gave a thin smile. "Aaliyah, you're overreacting. I just wanted to expand on the idea. I have connections, I have capital. If I present it first, it'll be easier for both of us." My fists clenched, my voice shaking with fury. "That's not just an idea you can sell off. That's my life, the reason I've endured sleepless nights. You said you believed in me, and now—" Ethan sighed, pouring himself wine. "You need to understand, the world is brutal. No one waits for a girl without a wealthy family behind her. If you're smart, you'll let me lead. Otherwise, you'll always just be another student hunched over a laptop." I went silent. All the trust, all the hope I had in him as my anchor shattered in that moment. I stood, grabbed my documents, and said firmly, "I'd rather fail with my own hands than succeed under the shadow of betrayal." Ethan tried to stop me. "Don't make this bigger than it is. You'll regret it." I walked out, heart aching but my steps steady. Outside, the night wind was icy, but inside me a fire blazed. I realized I was wrong to think safety could be found in someone else's arms. The truth was clear. The only person I could rely on was myself. That night, I returned to the dorm and sank to the floor. Chloe saw my red eyes and rushed over to hold me. Through sobs, I told her everything. She listened quietly, then said one short sentence I would never forget. "Show them, Aaliyah." Not with tears, but with success. From that moment, I knew I had lost a love, but found a strength greater than any romance. I was determined not only to complete EDU Fund, but to make it proof that I didn't need anyone to hand me a place. I would claim it myself no matter the cost. After the shaky days following Ethan's betrayal, I poured everything into EDU Fund. I no longer cared about relationships, nor did I dwell on the wounds he left behind. The only thing I saw ahead was opportunity, the chance to turn an idea into reality. And when the announcement for the national startup competition was posted across campus bulletin boards, my heart nearly leapt out of my chest. This wasn't a small contest. Hundreds of projects from top universities across the country would compete, many backed by entrepreneurial families, investment funds, or famous professors. I had an old laptop, a notebook filled with scribbles, the quiet support of Chloe, and the steady faith of Professor Hughes. The night I submitted my application, my hands shook so badly I mistyped several times. Chloe placed her hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Just send it, Aaliyah. If anyone deserves this, it's you." I nodded, hit send, and felt a surge of both fear and excitement. The following weeks drowned me in preparation. I practiced pitching, rewrote the core value statement again and again, and built slides on free software that lagged with every click. Every night, Chloe pretended to be a judge, firing questions at me. "How will you ensure students don't default? Who will provide the money? Where does your initial capital come from?" I learned to answer clearly, concisely, and most importantly, with conviction. On the day of the preliminaries at a large hotel in San Francisco, I wore a second-hand blazer and a white shirt with fraying collar. As I entered the ballroom, I saw other teams in tailored suits, shiny watches, and slick banners. They chatted confidently about how much funding they had already raised, how many mentors they had on board. I stood quietly in a corner, overhearing whispers. "She came alone? A sophomore girl thinks she can compete?" I took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage when my turn came. My heart raced, but as the spotlight hit me, fear melted away. I began with a question. In America, over 45 million students are burdened with crushing student debt. How many of you have children, grandchildren, or yourselves once carried student loans? Hands went up across the room. I continued. EDU Fund was born from my own experience, as a student working 3 jobs to pay tuition. I don't want anyone else to have to choose between food and books. Our app will change the way students borrow and repay tuition. Transparent, low interest, and designed to truly stand with them. At first, some judges folded their arms, eyes skeptical. A stern middle-aged man asked, "What makes you believe students will repay on time? Who gives you that confidence?" I answered firmly, "That confidence comes from my own life. When students are given a fair chance and transparency, they take responsibility. I am living proof. I've never missed a single bill, even without $1 of family support. If I can do it, millions of others can too." The room went silent for a few seconds. Then a female judge nodded, her expression softening. I knew I had touched an undeniable truth. I advanced into the national top 20. The days that followed turned me into a warrior of preparation. Professor Hughes came to watch a rehearsal, and after listening, he simply said, "Aaliyah, remember, you're not just convincing them with numbers but with your story. Let them see who you are." The night before the finals, I barely slept. Chloe forced me to eat a little ramen and said, "Tomorrow, stand on that stage as if you've already won. No matter the result, Hughes and I still believe in you." The next morning, I entered the Grand Hall in New York where the finals were held. The audience was packed with investors, journalists, and entrepreneurs. When I spoke, the room fell silent. I told the story of a girl who had to take the bus to class, who worked herself to exhaustion to pay rent, and whose only dream was that one day, poor students wouldn't have to choose between survival and education. I introduced EDU Fund not just as a product, but as a lifeline for an entire generation. When I finished, silence lingered for a beat. Then the hall erupted in applause. One of the judges, Ms. Hamilton, a venture capital director, stood and said, "Thank you for reminding us that entrepreneurship isn't just about profit but about change. EDU Fund is proof of that." When the MC announced me as the winner, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I stepped onto the stage to accept the $100,000 check, my hands trembling, my heart overflowing. Chloe screamed from the audience, while Professor Hughes smiled warmly, his eyes shining with pride. The next day, I was shocked to see my name on the front page of the Wall Street Journal startup section. Stanford student wins with solution to student debt crisis. The article analyzed EDU Fund in detail, calling me a young woman bold enough to challenge the system. Holding the paper, I felt a strange mix of disbelief and awe. All my life, I had grown used to my achievements being ignored. Now the world outside was looking straight at me. When Chloe asked, "Will you send this article to your parents?" I shook my head. No. They wouldn't understand. And I don't need them to anymore. Inside, my resolve only grew stronger. I knew this was just the beginning. EDU Fund wouldn't stop at an award or a headline. It would become reality, a place where millions of students could find the hope I once longed for. And I, Aaliyah Carter, would be the one to take them there, with every ounce of my strength and belief. I remember clearly that afternoon holding the embossed Stanford graduation invitation. The crimson logo gleamed, my name printed alongside the honor of graduating with distinction. To me, it wasn't just an invitation. It was proof of years I had carried myself alone, fighting each day without family by my side. I hesitated a long time before slipping the invitations into envelopes, addressed to Richard and Elaine Carter. I thought even if they never acknowledged me, a college graduation was still a milestone. A part of me, the little girl abandoned at 17, still longed for them to show up, to sit in the audience, to clap when my name was called. I even tucked in a note. "It would mean so much if you were there on this special day." 3 days later, my father called. His voice was flat as ever. "Aaliyah, we received your invitation." I held my breath, waiting for what came next. After a pause, he said firmly, "But you know that week conflicts with Madison's high school graduation. Her new car was just delivered. We need to take her to New York to celebrate with the family. You'll handle yours on your own." I gripped the phone until my fingertips whitened. My chest felt crushed. I bit my lip, trying to keep my voice steady. "Madison's ceremony is Friday, mine is Saturday. You could attend both." I heard my mother's voice in the background joining in. Aaliyah, everything's already arranged. We've booked the party, relatives are flying in. You're grown now, you don't need us holding your hand at events like this. Before I could respond, my father added another blow, cold and cruel. Don't waste money on unnecessary things. Just take the bus to your ceremony. I went numb. His words slashed through the last fragile hope I had clung to. I closed my eyes, tears rising, but forced my voice not to tremble. Yes, I understand. After hanging up, I sat frozen in my dorm room. Chloe walked in, saw my pale face, and immediately asked, "What happened?" I repeated every word of the call. When I got to the part where my father told me to take the bus, Chloe nearly jumped up. Unbelievable. They're really throwing a party for your sister and leaving you to fend for yourself on the most important day. I forced a smile, my eyes burning. What's new, Chloe? Hasn't it always been like this? But hearing it out loud, it still hurts. Chloe sat beside me, gripping my hand. You don't need them to prove your worth. You've done things 100 students with family support couldn't dream of. You won the startup competition, you have a project drawing real interest. This graduation will be yours whether they come or not. I stayed silent, listening. But inside the wound throbbed raw. I thought of Madison, always receiving new cars, lavish parties, while I hid ramen packs in my drawer to get by. I never hated her, but each time I saw the stark contrast, the bitterness rose like bile in my throat. That evening, I opened my old suitcase and placed inside the gown and cap the school had just given me. I stared at them for a long time, then whispered to myself, if my parents want me to take the bus, then I will. But I'll step off that bus as someone they can never again dismiss. The next day, during a meeting with Professor Hughes, I told him about it. He stayed silent, his eyes thoughtful. After a moment, he said, Aaliyah, some people can't see your worth. Not because you don't have it, but because they lack the ability to recognize it. You can't change them. But you can change how you see yourself. I nodded softly, feeling a bit lighter. Hughes continued, on your graduation day I'll be there. Chloe will be there. And all the people who believe in you will be there. Don't let your parents' empty seats overshadow that. On the way back, I thought a lot about his words. I realized that for years, I had craved my parents' recognition so much that I forgot about the others around me. People who, though not blood relatives, gave me their genuine support. Even so, that night I tossed and turned. My father's words, just take the bus, echoed relentlessly. I remembered the times I begged to attend science camp and was refused, the times I won awards no one came to see. All of it piled into this moment, like a final verdict on a childhood and youth scarred by neglect. I knew I would once again stand alone on an important day. But this time I was no longer the 17-year-old girl clutching a medal with tears streaming down her face. I was Aaliyah Carter, the woman who had proven she could walk her own path through every obstacle. And if my parents thought the bus would make me small, they were wrong. I would turn it into a symbol of strength. Because from that moment on, I swore I would go farther than any luxury car they ever bought Madison. Graduation day came faster than I expected. That morning, Palo Alto's sky was clear, sunlight spilling across golden trees. In my small dorm room, I put on the gown and cap. In the mirror, I saw a girl with eyes much fiercer than the day she first arrived at Stanford. Chloe stepped over, adjusted my red tassel, and smiled. You look incredible, Aaliyah. And today, no one can overshadow your light. I decided to honor my father's words by taking the bus. Not because I couldn't afford a cab, but because I wanted to feel every bit of the irony in that choice. I boarded the number 22 line, sat by the window, and watched the world go by. Around me were morning commuters, a few other students, a handful of elderly passengers staring at their phones. None of them knew that among them sat a girl about to walk onto the stage, not only to accept her diploma, but as the founder of a billion-dollar project. When the bus stopped at Stanford's gate, I stepped off, the breeze tugging at my gown. I took a deep breath and joined the stream of students heading toward the campus lawn. White chairs stretched across the green, crimson banners waving in the air. From a distance, I saw Professor Hughes and Chloe seated in the front row, waving at me. My heart warmed. The ceremony began with solemn music. One by one, students' names were called. Then I heard mine, Aaliyah Carter, valedictorian, finance. I rose, each step toward the stage steady and sure. Applause thundered around me. In that moment, every sleepless night, every tear on my notebook pages, surged back into my chest. I bowed as I received my diploma from the president. He held the microphone, not moving on to the next name. His voice rang out. Today I have the special honor of introducing Aaliyah Carter. Not only our valedictorian, she is also the founder of EDU Fund, a platform transforming how students access tuition. This project has just been valued at $1.2 billion, and Aaliyah has been recognized in Forbes 30 Under 30. The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, students leaping to their feet shouting my name. I froze for a moment, tears flooding my eyes. Looking down, I saw Chloe covering her face as she cried, Hughes smiling with glowing pride. Then by chance my gaze fell on the third row. There was my father, Richard, frozen, the program slipping from his hand. My mother, Elaine, her hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock. And Madison, my sister, once so spoiled, sat stunned, her phone slipping onto her lap, forgotten. I had no idea they would come. They had said they were too busy with Madison's new car and the party in New York. Yet here they were, watching this moment unfold, their faces pale with disbelief. I stepped to the podium, unfolded my prepared speech, and spoke with a steady, low voice. Today we sit here, each carrying our own story. Some had family support. Some scraped by on their own. But what we share is perseverance, our will to finish the journey. I paused, meeting the eyes of the crowd. I began Stanford with 3 part-time jobs, an old laptop, and nothing but faith that if I worked hard enough, someday no student would have to choose between a meal and a textbook. EDU Fund was born from that journey. And today, standing here, I want to remind us all, our worth lies not in where we start, but in how we rise above challenges. The applause roared again, tears glistening on many faces. I closed my speech and looked down at the row where my family sat. My father clutched the program again, his hands trembling. My mother tried to regain her composure, but her eyes were red. And Madison looked at me not with indifference but with awe. As I returned to my seat, Chloe squeezed my hand, whispering, "You did it, Aaliyah. They can't deny you anymore." I smiled, tears rolling freely. Among thousands cheering, I felt something I had never known before. I was no longer the shadow in my own family. I stood in the light and they were forced to see me whether they wanted to or not. When the ceremony ended, the campus lawn burst with color. Students tossed caps in the air, cheers mixing with music from loudspeakers, families rushing forward for photos. I stood amid the crowd, embraced by friends, professors, familiar faces congratulating me, while steadying myself as my parents and Madison pushed through, heading straight toward me. Richard came first, stretching a forced smile across his face, nothing like the cold voice on those calls. "Aaliyah," he spread his arms as though we'd been apart for years, "you've made your father proud. $1 billion, Forbes 30 Under 30. You kept this hidden well." I tilted slightly, letting his arm graze past my shoulder, but inside I was ice. I knew it wasn't the embrace of a father proud of his daughter, but the hurried grasp of a lawyer sensing opportunity. Elaine followed, her eyes glistening as if tears might fall, her voice sweet but too practiced. "Sweetheart, I never imagined you would achieve something like this. I truly regret not being there these past 4 years. But that's all in the past now. What matters is that we celebrate together as a family." I met her eyes, and behind the smile I saw the calculating glint. Even now, she thought a smile could cover everything. Madison was different. She stood back, clutching my graduation cap like a lost child. I didn't see smugness or carelessness on her face. She looked at me, her blue eyes trembling, voice shaky. You're the role model, not the Tesla, not the things mom and dad brag about. I never dared say it before, but I've always admired you. Her words pierced my heart, but I refused to falter. I breathed deep and spoke clearly so all three could hear. My family is the people who walked beside me these 4 years. Chloe, Professor Hughes, my EDU fund team. They believed in me when I had nothing but an old laptop and a dream. And you too. I stared at Richard and Elaine. You only came back when you smelled success. Richard's smile stiffened, his tone turning sharp. Aaliyah, you're being too harsh. Family is family. We could discuss the company. With my legal expertise, I could help manage things, protect you from trouble. This is when you need support. I gripped my diploma tighter and answered slowly, firmly. I've learned to live without support from either of you. If I had relied on neglect and coldness, I wouldn't be here today. EDU Fund was built from tears, sweat, and the faith of strangers who were genuine. And that is all I need. The air between us tightened like a stretched wire. Elaine opened her mouth to argue, but Madison suddenly stepped forward, blocking them. She turned to Richard and Elaine, her voice trembling but steady. Enough, Mom, Dad. Let her be free. I want to hear her, not your plans. Both my parents and I froze. This was the first time Madison had ever dared to defy them. In her eyes, I saw something new. Not the little sister sitting smugly at lavish parties, but a young woman who had just recognized the falsehood she too had been swept along with. Richard frowned but said nothing. Elaine placed a hand on his arm, signaling him to hold back. I exhaled, relieved but keeping my gaze sharp. Around us, the crowd kept cheering, taking photos, yet between us was a heavy silence. I looked at Madison and nodded gently. If you truly admire me, then start by stepping out of the circle they've built for you. You have the right to choose your own life, not live by expensive gifts. Madison's eyes welled with tears as she nodded slowly. Richard and Elaine remained silent. They had no words left to counter. A year passed since that graduation day. I now lived in New York in a high-rise overlooking Central Park. Each morning, as the sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows, I still felt a swell of emotion. I had once eaten instant noodles in a shabby dorm, once ridden the bus to class with dark circles from working 3 jobs. Now my company, EDU Fund, had expanded globally, opening offices in London and Singapore, signing partnerships with major universities. Thousands of students across America had escaped crushing debt thanks to the transparent tuition system we built. But what made me proudest wasn't valuation numbers or glowing headlines. It was our charity arm, the EDU Fund Foundation, where I set aside 10% of profits to fund scholarships for underprivileged students. I wanted to ensure no one had to endure those long nights crying alone as I once did. The biggest surprise was Madison. After my graduation, she made a dramatic change. One evening, she knocked on my New York apartment door, dragging a small suitcase, her blue eyes heavy but determined. Sis, I don't want to live inside that Tesla anymore. I don't want to be a doll for Mom and Dad to parade. I want a fresh start and I want to work with you. I was stunned, then embraced her. Madison had truly found her courage. She turned down easy money, left the sprawling mansion, and chose to stay in my apartment's living room, sleeping on the pull-out sofa. From then on, we lived together, truly as sisters. Madison joined the foundation, starting with simple tasks, entering data, reviewing student files. But soon she grew passionate, spending hours reading each story, each letter. Once, I caught her crying over an application from a girl in Texas forced to drop out for lack of money for books. Madison looked up, eyes red. I never understood until now how heavy what you went through really was. You were right. All those lavish gifts are nothing compared to knowing someone believes in you. I smiled, stroking her hair. What matters isn't that we were forgotten, but what we choose to do with those wounds. One spring afternoon, we sat in the foundation's office reviewing scholarship applications. A thick stack of files covered the table, each letter a slice of life. Madison carefully marked the most deserving, occasionally asking my opinion. When she paused at one file, a student in Ohio who wrote that he walked 5 miles to class because he couldn't afford bus fare, she bit her lip, her voice trembling. "Sis, this reminds me of you." I placed a hand on her shoulder, meeting her eyes. "Madison, make sure no one ever has to ride the bus to graduation alone again. Let's be the ones to send them the ticket, the laptop, or the scholarship so they'll never feel abandoned." Madison laughed through tears, nodding firmly. "I promise. This will be my life's work." In that moment, I felt the circle close. From two sisters forced into unfair roles, me the one who carried the weight, her the one spoiled beyond reason, we now stood side by side, rewriting our story. We were no longer products of favoritism, but allies on a path to restore fairness for others. Meanwhile, Richard and Elaine slowly faced the painful truth. They called many times, left messages, even sent handwritten letters, hoping to join the board or at least appear beside me at press events. But I had learned to set clear boundaries. I remained polite but firm. My company and foundation already have a new family, a team that believes and stands with me. There is no space for your schemes. They began to taste the sting of being left behind, the same sting I had carried for years. When Madison and I appeared in the media, hand in hand awarding scholarships, our parents were nothing but shadows lingering at the edge. That evening, after finishing the scholarship review, Madison and I sat on the balcony, gazing at New York's golden lights. I poured her a cup of hot cocoa. She chuckled. "Isn't it ironic? Back then you had to ride the bus alone. Now you're sending thousands of students to graduation on your own terms." I laughed too, our voices blending together without distance. That night, New York felt vast yet not cold. Because finally, I had a real family. Not the ones who birthed me, but those who chose to walk with me in the light. Looking back, I still ask myself, if my parents hadn't uttered those words, "Just take the bus," would I have been strong enough to walk this far? Perhaps those wounds shaped me into someone who could stand tall, who could turn pain into action. But I also realized that in life, no one is truly alone if we open our hearts to the right people. My story is only one glimpse among countless family stories, where love, favoritism, or coldness all leave their marks. I want to hear your thoughts. If you were in my place, would you choose forgiveness, or would you choose to walk away and redefine what family means? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow the channel to hear more journeys, stories of family, of kinship, and of the power of resilience in life. Because who knows, maybe in the next story you'll find a piece of yourself.